The star was dying, and with it, an entire world. In the Calith system, far beyond the bright centers of galactic civilization, the Talveen people watched their sun with growing terror. For 3,000 years, their crystalline bodies had absorbed its light, transformed it into the energy that sustained their lives. Now that same sun betrayed them, its light flickering and surging like a candle in the wind. Ambassador Crystallis stood in the high chamber, his translucent body reflecting the emergency lights in scattered rainbows. Around him, the Council of Elders trembled. Their kind did not weep with water, but the fractured light within their forms spoke of anguish beyond measure. The scientists confirm it, Crystallis said, his voice resonating like wind through crystal chimes. 47 days until the star enters terminal collapse. Perhaps 90 days until the end. Elder Harmonix dimmed, his usual bright azure fading to pale gray. And the Galactic Concordat? Have they responded to our petition? Crystallis felt something inside him crack, a fracture that had nothing to do with his crystalline structure. They have. The vote was unanimous. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. They will not help, Crystallis continued, forcing the words out. High Arbiter Zelthorn presented the Council's findings. To stabilize our star would require energy equal to the output of 12 industrial worlds for 5 years. To evacuate our population would require 10,000 ships making continuous runs for months. The cost, they said, exceeds the economic value of our entire species. Economic value? Harmonix's voice cracked like breaking glass. We are 4 billion souls. We are 4 billion souls who possess no rare resources, no strategic territory, and no advanced technology to trade. Crystallis said bitterly. The Concordat has declared our system under quarantine. No ship may enter. We are to be left to die with dignity, they said. Die quietly, so we do not disturb the galactic economy. The council chamber erupted in discord, crystalline voices clashing in harmonics of despair and rage. But Crystallis stood silent, watching the doomed sun through the transparent dome above. He thought of the children in the learning gardens, absorbing light and knowledge. He thought of the artists in the resonance halls, creating sculptures of solidified music. He thought of 4 billion individuals, each with dreams and fears and loves, all reduced to a single line in a Concordat accounting ledger. Not economically feasible. Not economically feasible. Not economically feasible. The galaxy, it seemed, had a price for everything, and the Talveen had been weighed and found wanting. Across the vast darkness of space, the distress beacon continued its automated broadcast, a plea sent to the uncaring void. Captain Elena Vasquez was reviewing cargo manifests when her communications officer called out. Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal. Automated, repeating. It's marked with Concordat quarantine codes. Elena looked up from her tablet, her dark eyes sharp. The wandering star was 3 days out from the nearest trade station, running a routine cargo haul of agricultural equipment. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous. Exactly the way Elena liked her runs after 20 years of merchant trading. Quarantine codes? She asked. What's the content? Lieutenant Marcus Chen worked his console, his young face frowning in concentration. It's from the Calith system. The Talveen. Their star is going critical, and they're requesting evacuation assistance. But Captain, the signal is tagged as closed by Concordat order. We're supposed to ignore it. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the Calith system. Even in simulation, she could see the star's instability, the dangerous fluctuations in its output. And there, the third planet, home to billions. How long do they have? She asked quietly. According to the beacon, 87 days when it was sent. That was 12 days ago. So, 75 days. Give or take. Elena stood and walked to the display, her boots silent on the deck. She touched the hologram of Calith III, her fingers passing through the light. Somewhere down there, billions of people were watching their sky, and waiting to die. The Concordat actually voted to let them all die? The question came from her chief engineer, Sarah Kim, who had entered the bridge to check on a minor power fluctuation. Her voice carried disbelief that bordered on horror. Apparently, Marcus said, pulling up the public records. The vote was recorded 40 days ago. All major species agreed. The cost to save them was too high. Too high, Sarah's voice rose. We're talking about 4 billion people. Elena continued to stare at the display. In her 20 years among the stars, she had learned that the galaxy was not kind. The major species, the insectoid Vrex, the methane-breathing Zolarians, the ancient Korsoth warriors, the aquatic Myrtani, they were old. So old that they had forgotten what it meant to struggle. They measured everything in efficiency, in cost-benefit analysis, in cold equations that balanced resources against returns. Humanity was new to this galactic stage, barely 2 generations since first contact. They were the junior members, the newcomers who still had to prove themselves worthy of respect. Earth had sent out its merchant ships and colony vessels, eager to trade and learn and find their place among the stars. But humanity remembered. They remembered what it was like to be vulnerable, to face extinction, to need help, and find none coming. Marcus, how far are we from Calith? Elena asked. Captain? He looked confused. We're about 6 days at standard cruise. But the system is under quarantine. We can't. I asked how far, Lieutenant. Not whether we should go. Marcus straightened. 6 days, Captain. Elena turned to face her crew. The Wandering Star was a small ship, a merchant vessel with a crew of 40. They hauled cargo, made honest trades, and stayed out of trouble. They were nobody special, just working people trying to make a living among the stars. Here's the situation, Elena said. The Concordat has abandoned the Talveen. 4 billion people are going to die because it's too expensive to save them. We are 6 days away. We have cargo holds that could carry maybe 20, 30,000 people if we strip everything out. She paused, letting that number hang in the air. 30,000 out of 4 billion. A drop of water in an ocean. We can't save them all. Elena continued. We can't save even a fraction of them. But we can respond. We can be the ones who show up when everyone else turned away. Or we can be like the rest of the galaxy and decide it's not our problem. Sarah spoke first. If we respond, we're breaking quarantine. The Concordat could sanction us, ban us from trade stations. We could lose everything. Yes, Elena agreed. But if we don't, Sarah continued, her voice steady, we're no better than they are. We're letting 4 billion people die when we could have at least tried something. Marcus was working his console again, his fingers flying. Captain, if we send a message to Earth, to the colonies, there are other human ships out here, maybe enough to make a difference. Elena felt something unfold in her chest, something that had been tight for 20 years of careful trading and careful neutrality. She thought of Earth, where nations that had fought each other for millennia had finally united when faced with the infinite dark. She thought of the colony worlds, where humans from every culture worked side by side to build new homes. She thought of humanity's stubbornness, that peculiar refusal to accept that some things were impossible. Set course for Calith, Elena ordered. Maximum speed. And Marcus, send that message. Send it to every human ship, station, and colony within range. Tell them the Talveen need help. Tell them we're going. Yes, Captain. Marcus's grin was fierce. As the Wandering Star changed course, Elena returned to the holographic display. 75 days. It wasn't much time, but maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. The message went out across the human networks, spreading from ship to ship, station to station, world to world. It was simple and direct. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the merchant ship Wandering Star. The Talveen people of the Calith system are facing extinction. Their star is dying. The galactic Concordat has voted to let them perish. I am heading to Calith to render what aid I can. Any human ship that can help. Any ship willing to stand up when the galaxy sits down. I ask you to join me. We can't save them all, but we can damn well try. On Earth, the message reached the United Nations Space Council in the middle of a budget meeting. Admiral James Chen, commander of the Human Defense Fleet, listened to it 3 times before standing and walking out of the conference room. He had work to do. On Mars Colony, dock workers heard it over their lunch break. By dinner, they were volunteering to retrofit cargo ships for passenger transport. On Europa Station, a retired colony ship was being stripped for parts. Within an hour of receiving the message, the decision was made to reactivate it instead. The message spread to Titan, to the Proxima colonies, to the mining stations in the asteroid belts. Everywhere it went, humans stopped and listened. And then, they began to move. In the Calith system, Ambassador Crystalis stood in the communications center, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Each sunset now felt like a countdown. Behind him, a technician monitored the distress beacon, more out of habit than hope. Ambassador, the technician said suddenly. I'm receiving a response to the beacon. Crystalis turned, his body brightening with desperate hope. No, sir. It's a human ship. A merchant vessel. They say they're 6 days out and coming to help. One ship. One small merchant ship coming to help 4 billion people. It should have been laughable. It should have been insulting. Instead, Crystalis felt that crack inside him begin to heal. Just a little. Respond, he said, his voice resonating with new harmonics. Tell them we are here. Tell them we see them coming. For the first time in weeks, Ambassador Crystalis allowed himself to hope. Not because one ship could save his people, but because somewhere in the vast, uncaring galaxy, someone had heard their cry and answered, I'm coming. And in that moment, that simple act of responding when everyone else had turned away, the seeds of something extraordinary were planted. Neither Crystalis nor Elena could know it yet, but the galaxy was about to learn a lesson it had forgotten over millennia of cold calculation and efficient indifference. It was about to remember what it meant to care. Captain Vasquez's message reached Earth 3 days after the wandering star entered the Calith system. It arrived in the middle of the night in New York, dawn in Beijing, afternoon in Sao Paulo. But time zones meant nothing when the message began to spread. Admiral James Chen was in his office at Luna Command when his aide burst through the door without knocking. The young woman's face was flushed, her tablet shaking in her hands. Sir, you need to see this. It's from Captain Vasquez. She's in the Calith system. James took the tablet and watched the video. Elena stood on her bridge, her face tired but determined. Behind her, he could see Talveen people moving through the corridors of her ship, their crystalline bodies catching the light. She spoke directly to the camera. This is day 4 in the Calith system. We've evacuated 32,000 Talveen and transferred them to the Wandering Star. We're at maximum capacity and starting our journey to the nearest safe world. It will take us 16 days round trip. That's one run. We need to make over 100 more. 2. Elena paused, and James saw something in her eyes that he recognized. He had seen it in mirrors, after particularly hard decisions. There are 4 billion people here. We can't save them all. We don't have enough ships, enough time, enough anything. But I'm asking Earth. I'm asking humanity. Is this who we are? Are we the species that does the math and walks away? Or are we the ones who show up anyway? The video ended. James stood silent for a long moment, then handed the tablet back to his aide. Get me the Security Council. Get me every ship captain in the fleet. Get me the colonial governors. He moved to his window, looking down at Earth below, that blue marble that had birthed humanity's stubbornness. And get me a logistics team. We're about to do something impossible. The United Nations convened an emergency session. The debate lasted 4 hours, voices raised in 17 languages. But the outcome was never really in doubt. Humanity had a peculiar defect in its collective psychology. When told something was impossible, when shown the math that proved failure, humans tended to say, "Watch this," and try anyway. The resolution passed with only 3 abstentions. Earth would answer Elena's call. The math was brutal and beautiful in its clarity. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the leading physicist on slipstream travel, stood before a room full of military officers, civilian volunteers, and logistics coordinators. Behind her, numbers glowed on a massive display. 4 billion people, she said, her Nigerian accent crisp. 71 days remaining. We have approximately 200 ships that can be retrofitted for mass passenger transport. Each ship can carry between 30,000 and 200,000 people, depending on size. Each round trip takes 16 days at maximum safe speed. She let them absorb the numbers. They didn't add up. They didn't even come close. At current capabilities, we can evacuate approximately 1.2 billion people. That leaves 2.8 billion who will die when that star goes critical. The silence in the room was absolute. However, Dr. Okonkwo continued, and James saw her eyes light up with the particular madness of scientists who saw a challenge instead of a wall. I've been working on experimental slipstream corridor technology. It creates a stable tunnel through subspace between 2 fixed points. If we can establish corridors between Calith and safe harbor worlds, we can cut transit time from 16 days to 4 days. If, someone called out, what's the success rate? In simulations? 60%. In practical application? Unknown. We've never tried it. Dr. Okonkwo's smile was fierce. But if it works, and if we can get enough ships, we might, possibly, perhaps, save them all. The room erupted in questions, but James was already moving. 4 days instead of 16. That changed everything. It gave them a chance. A small one, wrapped in uncertainty and held together by hope, but a chance nonetheless. The mobilization began immediately. Every shipyard from Earth to the outer colonies received the same order. Retrofit everything that can fly. Luxury cruise ships designed for wealthy tourists had their entertainment systems ripped out and replaced with life support. Military vessels designed for war became transports. Cargo haulers that had never carried anything more precious than grain prepared to carry children. On Mars, dock worker Miguel Rodriguez stood in Bay 17, looking at the colony ship Endeavour. She was 80 years old, a relic from the first wave of colonization. She had carried 50,000 people to Mars in 2143 and had been sitting in mothballs ever since. "You sure she'll fly?" Miguel asked the chief engineer. "She'll fly. Whether she'll hold together for multiple slipstream transits is another question." The engineer patted the hull affectionately. "But she's tough. She'll do her part." Miguel thought about his grandmother, who had made the journey on this very ship. She had told him stories of those early days when humanity looked up at the stars and decided to reach for them despite every reason to stay home. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, despite the math that said it was too hard. "Then let's get her ready," Miguel said. "We've got people to save." The message spread beyond Earth, beyond the colonies, out to every human ship scattered across the trading lanes. The SS Mariner was hauling fertilizer to agricultural world Kepler 442b when they received the call. Captain Tom Booth was 63, 3 months from retirement, dreaming of a small house by a lake. He read the message twice, then called his crew together. 23 people, most of them young, all of them looking at him with expectation. "We've been asked to volunteer for an evacuation mission," Tom said. "The Talveen in Calith. You've probably heard about it. They're offering to compensate us for lost cargo and time, but I'll be straight with you. This is dangerous. Unstable star, experimental technology, and we're breaking a Concordat quarantine. We could lose our licenses. We could lose the ship. We could lose our lives." He paused, looking at each face. I'm going. The company owns the ship, but they've given me authority to decide. Anyone who wants off, no judgment. We can drop you at the next station. Nobody moved. His first mate, a young woman named Jennifer, spoke up. Captain, my grandparents were refugees. The Syrian crisis, way back. They told me stories about the boats that came, the people who risked everything to pull drowning children from the water. They said those strangers saved their lives, expecting nothing in return. She straightened. I think it's our turn to be the boat that comes. Tom felt his eyes sting. He nodded. Then let's go be the boat. The Wandering Star completed its first run, arriving at Proxima Station with 32,000 exhausted but alive Talveen. Ambassador Crystallis emerged from the ship, his crystalline form dimmer than normal from the stress but intact. He looked around at the station, at the humans rushing to help his people disembark, at the medical teams ready to assist, at the housing facilities being prepared. Elena stood beside him, running on stimulants and sheer willpower. I need to refuel and head back. Every hour counts. Captain, Crystallis said, his voice resonating with harmonics of gratitude that human ears couldn't fully capture but could somehow feel. Why? Your species barely knows us. The Concordat will punish you for this. Why would humans risk so much for strangers? Elena was quiet for a moment, watching a human volunteer kneel down to help a small Talveen child, no higher than his knee, the little one's body flickering with fear. The volunteer spoke softly, gently, until the child's light steadied. Because someone has to, Elena finally said. Because if we wait for it to make sense, if we wait until the cost is acceptable, if we wait for someone else to go first, then nobody ever does anything. And then, what kind of galaxy are we living in? She turned to face him. My grandfather fought in the Third World War. He saw humanity at its worst, but he also saw humans throw themselves on grenades to save their friends, saw medics run into fire to pull out the wounded, saw enemies become brothers when faced with something bigger than their differences. Elena's voice was soft but steady. He told me that humanity's greatest strength wasn't our technology or our weapons. It was our stubborn, stupid, wonderful refusal to leave anyone behind, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. She smiled tiredly. So here we are, being stubborn and stupid and wonderful. Crystallis felt light pulse through him, emotions that his kind had no words for but that needed no translation. Then, we are blessed to have met you, Captain. The galaxy may be old and wise and efficient, but it has forgotten something that you humans remember. What's that? That some things are worth more than they cost. Back in the Calith system, the sky was filling with ships. The Endeavor arrived first among the Earth fleet, her old hull groaning but holding. Behind her came military transports, merchant vessels, even a luxury liner called the Celestial Dream that had been carrying rich tourists just a week ago. Within 10 days of Elena's message, 70 human ships had arrived. The Talveen watched from their world as the sky filled with metal and hope. Dr. Okonkwo arrived aboard a military research vessel, her team immediately beginning to set up the slipstream corridors. The technology was untested, dangerous, and possibly impossible. She worked 18-hour days, running calculations, adjusting parameters, testing and retesting. On day 12, they were ready to try. The Endeavor would be the first ship through the experimental corridor. Miguel Rodriguez stood on the bridge as Captain Sarah Washington prepared for the jump. Behind them, 150,000 Talveen crowded into every available space. Slipstream corridor established. Dr. Okonkwo's voice came over the comms from the research vessel. Endeavor, you are clear for transit. May God and physics be with you. Here goes everything, Sarah said, and engaged the drives. Space folded. The Endeavor disappeared from the Calith system, and 4 days later, instead of 16, emerged at Proxima Station intact. The experimental corridor worked. The logistics transformed overnight. 4 days meant more runs. More runs meant more people saved. The calculations that had promised failure suddenly suggested possibility. But as the fleet grew, so did the attention. The Galactic Concordat watched humanity's efforts with growing concern. High Arbiter Zelthorn, leader of the Vrex and speaker for the Concordat, issued a formal statement. The humans' efforts, while admirable in sentiment, are a violation of quarantine protocols. Economic models indicate their intervention will destabilize regional markets. We demand immediate cessation of these activities. Admiral Chen received the message aboard his flagship, now holding position in the Calith system. He read it twice, then recorded his response. High Arbiter, thank you for your concern. We note your demands and have filed them appropriately. He paused, his face expressionless. Humanity will continue evacuation operations until every Talveen who wishes to leave has been safely relocated. The Concordat's economic models are noted. Our moral obligations supersede them. He ended the transmission without waiting for a response. The threats came next. Trade sanctions, denial of docking rights, restriction of access to Concordat markets. Each threat was calculated to hurt humanity's fledgling position in galactic society. Earth's response was simple. Understood. We continue. On day 23, the fleet had evacuated 800 million Talveen. 3 billion remained. Time was running out. The star's decay was accelerating. They had perhaps 45 days left. And even with the slipstream corridors, even with 100 ships working around the clock, the math still said they would fail. Elena stood on the bridge of the Wandering Star, now on her 5th run, watching the latest calculations. They were going to save billions, but billions would still die. The knowledge sat in her chest like ice. Captain, Marcus said quietly. Message from Admiral Chen. The fleet continues to grow. More ships arriving every day. We're up to 140 vessels now. 140 ships. Thousands of humans who had volunteered, who had dropped everything, who had looked at the impossible task and said, yes. How many can we save now? Elena asked. Marcus worked his console. If current rates continue, 3.2 billion. 700 million to die. The number was an improvement. It was also unbearable. Elena looked out at the Talveen world below, at the cities still glowing in the dusk, at the billions of lives still going about their days even as their sun betrayed them. She thought about the humans working themselves to exhaustion, about the ships straining at the edge of their capabilities, about everyone giving everything they had, and she thought, it's still not enough, but it's more than nothing. It's more than walking away. It's more than letting the math decide who deserves to live. Keep going, she said. Every ship, every run, every person. We save who we can, Marcus nodded. But they both knew the truth. They were performing a miracle. And the miracle wasn't big enough. Not yet. The news spread across the galaxy like ripples in still water. At first, it was curiosity, then disbelief. Finally, something that many species had not felt in centuries. Shame. On the water world of Mirton, healer Silnara floated in her meditation chamber, watching the news feeds through her translucent eyelids. The humans had been at it for 31 days now. 160 ships. 1.4 billion Talveen evacuated. The images showed human crew members, exhausted beyond measure, still loading refugees. She saw one human, a young male, collapse from fatigue, only to wake up 4 hours later and immediately return to work. They are killing themselves, her colleague healer Tornas said, his aquamarine body rippling with concern. The medical reports indicate widespread exhaustion, malnutrition, stress injuries. They push themselves beyond reasonable limits. Yes, Silnara agreed, watching a human child, no more than 10 years old, helping distribute food to Talveen refugees at a processing center. They do. It is inefficient, irrational. They cannot save them all. The mathematics are clear. We can see our grancing, our weight, the HFY, weighty. The mathematics, Silnara said slowly, do not account for what I am seeing. Tell me, Tornas, when was the last time you saw someone ignore mathematics for morality? Her colleague had no answer. In 3,000 years of Mirtani civilization, such things simply did not happen. They had evolved beyond such inefficiency, or so they told themselves. Silnara made a decision that would cost her position in the medical collective. She began loading medical supplies onto a transport. If the humans could be irrational, perhaps it was time for some irrationality of her own. On the war world of Korsoth Prime, Battle Commander Telos watched the same feeds with different eyes. The Korsoth were warriors, their entire culture built around strength, honor, and combat. They respected power. They respected force. They did not respect weakness. Yet here were the humans, the newest and weakest members of galactic society, doing something the Korsoth had deemed impossible, not through superior weapons or mighty fleets, but through sheer, bloody-minded stubbornness. Telos watched a video of the human ship Endeavor, her hull scarred from multiple slipstream transits, limping back to Calith for another run despite her damage. The human captain refused to stand down, refused to rest, refused to quit. That is a warrior, Telos said aloud to his empty chamber. That is honor. He thought of the Concordate's response. Threats, sanctions, economic pressure, the tools of merchants and politicians. The Korsoth had gone along with the Concordate decision because the Talveen had no strategic value, no military worth. It was practical. It was sensible. It was, Telos realized with growing discomfort, cowardice dressed in reasonable clothing. He stood, his massive form moving with predatory grace despite his advanced age. He had commanded battle groups through 3 wars. He had faced death more times than he could count, but he had never felt shame quite like this. Prepare my ship, he ordered, and a full battle group. We are going to Calith. For what purpose, Commander? His aide asked. To observe, Telos said. But they both knew it was more than that. It was to witness, to see if the humans' courage would hold, and perhaps, though he would not yet admit it aloud, to help. The feeds continued to spread. On the crystal cities of Varthos, in the methane clouds of Zolar, on 1,000 worlds across the Concordate, people watched. They watched humans work until they collapsed. They watched ships, held together by determination and prayer, make run after impossible run. They watched a species risk everything for strangers, and slowly, quietly, like ice beginning to crack, something shifted in the galactic consciousness. On day 34, disaster struck. The human transport ship, Liberty, carrying 120,000 Talveen, suffered a catastrophic drive failure midway through a slipstream corridor. The ship emerged in normal space, stranded, its engines dead, its crew fighting to maintain life support. The message reached Admiral Chen within minutes. Liberty is dead in space. Engines are completely shot. Engineering says it would take 2 weeks to repair, and we don't have the parts. Position? Chen asked, his face grim. They're in the Theta sector. 3 days from the nearest human ship, at best speed. Chen did the calculations instantly. 3 days to reach Liberty. 2 weeks to repair, which they didn't have time for. The only option was to evacuate Liberty's refugees to the rescue ship. But that would take both ships out of the evacuation rotation for nearly a week. We've evacuated 1.6 billion, his logistics officer said quietly. Every ship matters. If we pull vessels to rescue Liberty, we lose evacuation capacity. We could lose another 100 million Talveen because of this. Chen looked at the young officer. Are you suggesting we leave Liberty? I'm suggesting we consider the mathematics, sir. The mathematics. Chen stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the Calith system, at the dying star, at the world below. Let me tell you about mathematics, Lieutenant. The Concordat did their mathematics. They calculated that 4 billion lives weren't worth the cost. We're here because we decided that mathematics doesn't get the final vote. He turned back. Send the nearest ships to Liberty. We don't leave our people behind. We don't leave the Talveen they're carrying behind. That's not who we are. The rescue ships diverted. The evacuation rates slowed. The mathematics that already said they would fail became worse. Aboard Liberty, Captain Marcus Osei gathered his crew. They had 48 hours of life support left. 3 days until rescue arrived. We need to cut life support to the crew sections, his chief engineer said. Reroute everything to the refugee areas. It's the only way to make the air last. Marcus looked around at his crew. 37 people, mostly young, mostly volunteers. They had signed up knowing the risks, but knowing and facing were different things. How long will that buy us? Marcus asked. Maybe 6 hours. Enough to reach rescue if they're not delayed. And us? We'll be breathing recycled air through emergency filters. It'll be uncomfortable, possibly dangerous if we're unlucky. Marcus thought about the Talveen in the cargo holds, the children and elderly, the families who had already lost everything but their lives. He thought about what the Concordat would do. They would run the numbers. They would make the efficient choice. Do it, Marcus ordered. Crew life support to minimum. Keep the refugees breathing. None of his crew argued. They had all made the same calculation, just not with numbers. It was right. That was enough. The message reached Earth when Captain Marcus Osei recorded a video. His breathing labored in the thin air. This is Liberty. We're alive. All refugees are safe. Crew is managing. We'll hold until rescue arrives. Tell our families we're okay. Tell them we're doing what we came here to do. The video went viral across human networks. It reached the Talveen, it reached the Concordat, and it reached other species who were beginning to question their own choices. Healer Silnara's transport arrived in the Calith system on day 36. She brought medical supplies, regeneration pods, and 12 of the finest medical technicians in Mirtani society. All volunteers, all risking censure from their government. Admiral Chen met her ship personally. Healer Silnara, you're risking a great deal by coming here. Yes, she agreed, her aquatic form rippling with determination. But I watched humans risk everything, and I remembered something. We, Mirtani, were once a dying species. 2,000 years ago, a plague nearly wiped us out. We survived because we helped each other, because we refused to let the mathematics decide our fate. She looked at Chen with her large, ancient eyes. We became wise. We became efficient. But somewhere along the way, we forgot why we survived. The humans reminded us. So here we are, being foolish and inefficient and beautifully alive. Her medical teams deployed immediately, treating exhausted human crews, setting up hospital facilities for injured refugees. The Mirtani had some of the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy. Now it was being used to keep humans working, keep ships flying, keep the impossible effort going. Commander Talos arrived 2 days later with 15 Korsoth warships. His message to Chen was brief. We are here to observe. Also to protect your vessels from pirates who might prey on refugee ships. Also to provide security at transfer stations. Observe very actively, you understand. What he meant was, we are here to help, but our government hasn't authorized it. So we will call it observation. Chen understood perfectly. Your observation is most appreciated, Commander. The Korsoth battle group established patrol routes. No pirate would dare approach a Korsoth warship. But more than that, the warriors began helping load refugees, their massive strength moving supplies that would take humans hours in mere minutes. Talos himself worked alongside human volunteers, saying nothing but showing everything through action. More came. A group of Varthos engineers, experts in energy systems, arrived with equipment to help stabilize ships pushed beyond their design limits. We are conducting a research study on drive efficiency under extreme conditions, their leader claimed. It requires us to repair and optimize every ship here. For science, you understand. A merchant consortium of Dulasi traders, known for their business sense, arrived with food supplies. "The humans are terrible at supply chain management," their spokesperson said with what might have been affection. "Someone must help them, or they will forget to eat while saving the galaxy." Each arrival was quiet. Each came with an excuse. Each violated the Concordate's orders in their own way. And each added to humanity's capability. The evacuation rate increased. 2 billion Talveen saved. Then 2.2. Then 2.5. But the star continued to decay. Time was running out faster than projections. They had perhaps 28 days left. Maybe less. On day 42, the wandering star began its 9th run. Elena stood on her bridge, looking at the numbers. Her ship was failing. Every ship in the fleet was failing. They had pushed the vessels beyond what they were designed for, run them harder than safety allowed, and maintained them with spare parts and hope. "Captain," Marcus said, his voice tight, "I'm showing stress fractures in the hull. Engineering says we're at 70% structural integrity. Another 3 runs, maybe 4. Then we need to dock for serious repairs." "How long for repairs?" 2 weeks. Minimum. 2 weeks they didn't have. Elena looked at the screen showing the Talveen world below. 3 days ago, she had met a Talveen woman named Resonance, who was an artist. She created sculptures of solidified sound, beautiful beyond description. Resonance had chosen to stay behind, to be among the last evacuated, to ensure that younger Talveen went first. "We'll make those runs," Elena said. "However many we can. Then we'll dock, and we'll repair, and if there's time, we'll come back." She didn't say what they both knew. If they had to dock for repairs, they probably wouldn't make it back in time. This might be her last run. The thought sat in her chest like lead. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She wandered through her ship, through corridors filled with sleeping Talveen, their crystalline bodies dimmed in rest. She found a small child sitting alone, its light flickering with fear. Elena sat down beside the child, her back against the wall. "Can't sleep?" The child's light pulsed in a pattern she had learned meant sadness. "I'm scared. My parents are still down there. We got separated. They put me on the ship, but they're still waiting." "We'll get them," Elena promised. "We'll keep coming back until everyone who wants to leave can leave." "But what if you can't? What if the star?" The child's light dimmed almost to nothing. Elena reached out, not quite touching the crystalline form, but close enough that her warmth could be felt. "Then we'll have tried. We'll have given everything we had. Sometimes that's all anyone can do." "Is that enough?" Elena thought about the question. Was it enough to try and fail? Was it enough to save 2 billion when 4 billion needed saving? Was it enough to do everything possible and still fall short? "I don't know," she admitted. "But it's better than not trying at all. And maybe, just maybe, trying is how you change what's possible." The child's light steadied a little. They sat together in silence until sleep finally came for the small Talveen. Elena remained awake, thinking about the days ahead. Thinking about all the ships and crews pushing themselves to the breaking point. Thinking about the Talveen, still waiting below. Thinking about the impossible mathematics and the stubborn, stupid, wonderful humans who kept working despite them. On day 45, the evacuation numbers reached 2.7 billion saved. 1.3 billion remained on the planet below. 23 days until stellar collapse. Maybe less. The entire fleet was showing signs of strain. Ships were breaking down faster than they could be repaired. Crews were working on 4 hours of sleep a night. The logistics were falling apart, and yet they continued. Every ship, every run, every person. The galaxy watched, and for the first time in centuries, species that had calculated themselves into comfortable indifference began to ask themselves an uncomfortable question. If the humans could do this, if they could look at the impossible and try anyway, what did that say about everyone else who had looked at the same impossible and walked away. The answer was spreading like dawn across the galaxy. And dawn, once it starts, cannot be stopped. On day 48, the projections became undeniable. Admiral James Chen stood in the command center aboard his flagship, staring at numbers that told a story no one wanted to hear. Around him, his staff worked in exhausted silence, running and rerunning calculations as if they could somehow change reality through repetition. Final numbers, his chief logistics officer said, her voice flat with fatigue. At current evacuation rates, factoring in increasing ship failures and the accelerating stellar decay, we can save approximately 3 billion Talveen. 400 million will be left behind when the star goes critical in 17 days. 400 million. The number was an obscenity. It was also the best they could do. Chen looked around at his staff. They had worked miracles for 48 days straight. They had organized the largest rescue operation in galactic history. They had proven that humanity's stubborn compassion could move mountains. And it still wasn't enough. Options, he asked, though he already knew there were none. We can't get more ships here in time. The ones we have are failing faster than we can repair them. We're losing 3 to 5 ships a day to critical malfunctions. At some point in the next week, we'll have to choose between continuing runs and ensuring the ships we have can safely evacuate the refugees already aboard. So we leave 400 million people to die. Sir, we've saved 3 billion. That's 3 billion people who would have died without us. That's not enough, Chen interrupted. It's incredible. It's amazing. It's not enough. He stood and walked to the communications console. He thought about his grandfather, who had fought in the wars before Unity. His grandfather had told him once that the worst part of command wasn't making hard decisions. It was making the right decision, and having to live with it anyway. Chen opened a broadcast channel. Fleet-wide, every ship, every crew, every human in the Calith system. This is Admiral Chen. I want to share the latest projections with you. The truth, as hard as it is, he took a breath. We can save 3 billion Talveen. 400 million will be left behind. We don't have the ships. We don't have the time. We don't have the means to save everyone. Sinjing. He paused, letting that sink in. Across 150 ships, thousands of humans stopped what they were doing to listen. I know what the logical choice is. We continue evacuations for another week. Then we stop. We save who we can, and we leave. We tell ourselves that 3 billion saved is a victory. We go home, and we try to live with what we had to do. His voice hardened. But I'm not giving that order. Instead, I'm giving each of you a choice. We can leave in 1 week, or we can stay until the end. We can be here, standing with the Talveen who remain, so that no one dies alone. So that 400 million people know that someone cared enough to stand with them when their world ended. The silence on the channel was profound. If we stay, we'll die with them. There's no sugarcoating that. The stellar collapse will destroy everything in the system. But we'll die, having done everything we could. We'll die, having shown the galaxy what it means to care more about people than calculations. Chen's voice softened. I'm not ordering anyone to stay. I'm asking. I'm asking if you're willing to stand together. One last time. With people we came here to save. To show them and the galaxy that some things matter more than survival. He closed his eyes. Think about it. Talk with your crews. You have 6 hours to decide. Any ship that wants to leave. No judgment. You've already done more than anyone could ask. But I'm staying. And if you choose to stay with me, then we'll face what comes together. The broadcast ended. Chen stood in the silence of his command center, wondering if he had just asked his people to commit suicide for a symbolic gesture. His communications officer spoke first, her voice steady. Sir, the ship votes are coming in. Already? Yes, sir. Wandering Star reports entire crew votes to stay. Endeavor votes to stay. Liberty votes to stay. Her voice began to shake. Sir, they're all voting to stay. Every ship, every crew. Chen felt something crack inside his chest. All of them? Yes, sir. All of them. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. 147 ships. Not a single one is leaving. The command center erupted. Officers who had maintained professional composure for 48 days of hell broke down. Some wept. Some cheered. Some simply stared in disbelief at what humanity had just chosen to do. Chen sat down hard in his chair. Thousands of humans. All voting to stay. All choosing death over abandonment. Get me a channel to the Talveen, he said quietly. Ambassador Crystalis needs to know. The message reached the planet within minutes. Ambassador Crystalis stood in the high chamber, surrounded by the remaining Talveen elders. They had been coordinating the final evacuations, prioritizing children and the young, preparing for the reality that many of them would be among the 400 million left behind. Ambassador, his communications aide said, we're receiving a message from Admiral Chen. It's being broadcast to the entire planet. Chen's face appeared on every screen, every display, every personal device across the Talveen world. His expression was calm, but Crystalis could see the weight in his eyes. People of Talveen, this is Admiral James Chen of the Human Defense Fleet. I have news. We cannot save everyone. Our projections show that 400 million of your people will remain when the star collapses in 17 days. Across the planet, Talveen dimmed with despair. But Chen wasn't finished. However, we will not leave you to face this alone. The entire human fleet has voted unanimously to remain in the Calith system until the end. We will continue evacuations until the last possible moment. And for those who remain when time runs out, we will stand with you. No one will die alone. No one will be abandoned. We will be here, together, until the very end. 1. Crystalis felt his crystalline form resonate with an emotion so powerful it nearly shattered him. Around the planet, 4 billion Talveen responded, their collective light creating a pulse, visible from space. It was grief and gratitude and disbelief all at once. Why? Crystalis whispered to the screen, even though Chen couldn't hear him. Why would you do this? But he already knew the answer. Because humans were strange and stubborn, and somehow thought that standing together mattered more than standing safe. Because they had looked at the galaxy's cold equations and said, no, people matter more than that. The broadcast reached beyond Calith. It spread through human networks first, then leaked to other species. Within hours, the entire galaxy knew. Humanity was choosing to die with the Talveen they couldn't save. The reaction was immediate and unprecedented. On the water world of Murtan, healer Silnara watched the broadcast and made a decision. She opened an emergency channel to the Murtani Council. This is healer Silnara, currently in the Calith system. I am formally requesting the Council dispatch our deep space medical vessels to Calith immediately. The humans are staying to the end. We cannot let them die alone. I am invoking the Oath of Preservation, which supersedes Council authority. The Oath of Preservation was ancient, rarely used, but absolute. Any Murtani could invoke it to save lives, and no authority could countermand it. Within the hour, 12 Murtani hospital ships were en route to Calith. On the Korsoth Prime, Commander Telos stood before the War Council. The humans have declared their intention to stand with the Talveen until death. The Korsoth respect honor above all else. If we do not stand with them, we declare ourselves without honor. The War Council erupted in argument, but Telos spoke over them. I am invoking the right of personal honor. My battle group will remain in Calith. Any warrior who wishes to maintain their honor will join me. This is not a request for permission. This is notification of decision. The right of personal honor was sacred to the Korsoth. A warrior who invoked it could not be stopped without combat. The War Council had no choice but to accept. Telos's broadcast went out to all Korsoth military vessels. Within hours, 73 ships had declared their intention to join him in Calith, not because they were ordered to, because honor demanded it. On Varthos, the Crystal Collective watched and calculated. The Varthos were engineers, builders, masters of energy manipulation. They looked at the dying star and saw not an impossibility, but an engineering challenge that no one had been willing to pay for. The collective's decision was unanimous. They would pay. All of them. The message from the Varthos arrived at the Calith system on day 50. Admiral Chen read it 3 times, certain he was misunderstanding. The Varthos are sending their stellar engineering fleet? He said to his communications officer. The entire fleet? Yes, sir. 12 stellar engineering vessels, including their flagship, Harmony of Forces. They're equipped with equipment capable of stellar stabilization. Or at least slow it down enough to buy us more time. Chen felt the deck seem to shift under his feet. How much time? They estimate they can extend stability by 30 to 40 days if they push their equipment to maximum, maybe more if they get creative. 30 to 40 days. With that much time, they could evacuate everyone. Every single Talveen. Not 3 billion. Not 3.6 billion. All of them. The galaxy continued to mobilize. Species that had voted to abandon the Talveen now raced to help save them. It wasn't logic that moved them. It wasn't calculation or economic sense. It was something older and more fundamental. It was shame. The Galactic Concordat convened an emergency session. High Arbiter Zelthorn stood before the assembled representatives, his insectoid form rigid with stress. The chamber was in chaos. Order, Zelthorn called. We must have order, but there was no order to be had. Representative after representative stood to declare their species' intention to send aid to Calith. The Concordat, the ancient institution that had governed the galaxy for millennia, was fracturing before his eyes. This is madness, Zelthorn declared. We made a rational decision based on sound economic principles. The cost to save the Talveen exceeded what? The voice came from Ambassador Syl of the Dulasi, a species known for their business acumen. Exceeded our comfort, our convenience, our carefully maintained profit margins? Syl stood, her small form trembling with emotion. I watched the humans. I watched them work until they collapsed. I watched them vote to die, rather than abandon people they barely knew. And I realized something. We didn't abandon the Talveen because it was impossible. We abandoned them because it was expensive, because it was hard, because it would disrupt our comfortable existence. She looked around the chamber. The humans showed us what we've become. We've become so civilized, so efficient, so rational, that we forgot the most basic principle. Some things matter more than cost. Lives matter more than credits. Compassion matters more than convenience. The chamber fell silent. Zelthorn felt something he had not felt in his century of leadership. Uncertainty. He had been so certain the Concordat's decision was correct. The mathematics supported it. The economic models validated it. Every rational measure said they had made the right choice. But mathematics didn't account for the way the entire galaxy had responded to humanity's choice. Didn't account for the shame that now burned in the thorax of every Vrex, including himself. Didn't account for the fact that the humans, the youngest and weakest species in galactic society, had just taught everyone else what true strength looked like. The vote was unanimous, Zelthorn said, but his voice lacked conviction. We agreed. We were wrong, Syl interrupted. Unanimously wrong. And now we have a choice. We can remain wrong, hide behind our rules and economics and pride, or we can learn from the humans. We can admit our mistake and fix it. Another voice joined in, then another. Species after species stood to acknowledge their failure. The Concordat, built on order and rationality, was experiencing something new and uncomfortable. Moral reckoning. Finally, Zelthorn made a decision. Emergency motion. All previous decisions regarding the Calith system are hereby suspended. The Concordat will provide full support for evacuation operations. All available resources are to be deployed immediately. He paused, his voice dropping. And I will personally lead the Vrex Stellar Engineering Corps to Calith. The humans taught us that some things are worth more than they cost. It's time we remembered. After the plan was by, quote, the vote passed unanimously. The same body that had condemned the Talveen now raced to save them. On day 53, the Calith system's sky filled with ships. Not just human vessels, but ships from across the galaxy. Mirtani hospital ships, Korsoth battle groups, Varthos engineering vessels, Dulasi supply transports, Vrex stellar engineering platforms, an armada beyond imagining. All converging on one dying system. All coming because a handful of humans had looked at the impossible and said, watch us try. Abscess. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Wandering Star, watching the flood of vessels arrive. Beside her, Marcus was crying, unashamedly. They came, he said. The whole galaxy came. Elena thought about that first day, when she had responded to a distress beacon everyone else had ignored. She thought about the choice she had made to try when trying seemed pointless. She thought about humanity's stubborn, stupid, wonderful refusal to accept that some lives didn't matter. Yes, she said softly. They came. We showed them the way, and they followed. Ambassador Crystallis stood on the surface of his world, watching the sky fill with ships. The dying sun cast strange shadows, but above it, the darkness was filled with lights. Thousands of ships, millions of people, all here to help. He thought about the Concordat's original message. Not economically feasible. 4 simple words that had sentenced his people to death. And he thought about Captain Vasquez's response. I'm coming. 2 words that had saved his entire species. The stellar engineering teams went to work immediately. Varthos and Vrex engineers, working together for the first time in centuries, deployed massive energy collectors around the dying star. They began the delicate, dangerous process of stabilizing the stellar core, extracting excess energy, cooling the fusion reactions. It was brutal work. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of thing the Concordat had deemed too expensive. But now, with the galaxy watching and shame burning in every heart, cost didn't matter anymore. The evacuation continued, now reinforced by hundreds of additional ships. The rate increased. 4 billion saved. 4.2, 4.5. On day 68, as the sun began to stabilize, the final Talveen refugee boarded a Korsoth transport vessel. The last person to leave was Ambassador Crystallis, who stood on the boarding ramp and looked back at his world one final time. Will we ever return? He asked Captain Elena Vasquez, who had insisted on being there for the final evacuation. Maybe, Elena said. The engineers say they can stabilize the star long enough to restore the planet. It'll take decades. But maybe. Crystallis looked at her, his crystalline form glowing with gratitude. We are in your debt, humanity's debt. The galaxy's debt. No debt, Elena said. We just did what needed doing, and besides, we didn't do it alone. In the end, everyone stood together. As the final ship lifted off, leaving the Calith world empty but intact, a message broadcast across all channels. It was from Admiral Chen. To all species, all vessels, all people who came to Calith. Today we proved something. We proved that compassion is not inefficient. That caring is not weakness. That standing together is the strongest thing any of us can do. We came here ready to die. Instead, we taught the galaxy how to live. His voice carried weight and pride. 4 billion Talveen are alive because we decided that lives matter more than mathematics. Remember this day. Remember what we accomplished when we chose to stand together. A. In the command center of his flagship, Chen closed the channel and allowed himself, finally, to feel the exhaustion. 68 days. No sleep. No rest. But they had done it. All of them. Together. 1 year later, the planet designated New Talveen bloomed with crystalline cities. The world had been chosen carefully, its sun stable and bright, its conditions perfect for a species that lived on light. From orbit, the settlements glowed like scattered jewels across continents, reflecting the determination of a people who had been given a second chance. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the window of the transport, bringing her down to the surface, watching those cities grow larger. She had not wanted to come to the ceremony. She had returned to merchant trading 6 months ago, avoiding the interviews and celebrations that had followed the Caliph rescue. But Ambassador Crystalis had asked personally, and some requests you simply could not refuse. The transport landed in the capital city, now called Hope's Landing. The name made Elena smile despite herself. Humans had not chosen it. The Talveen had. They had a moon they had named Last Light, in honor of those final days watching their old sun die. Crystalis met her at the landing pad, his crystalline form brighter than she remembered. Captain Vasquez, thank you for coming. I almost didn't, Elena admitted. I'm not good at ceremonies. I know. That is why your presence means so much. Crystalis gestured toward the city. Come. There is much to show you before the gathering. They walked through streets of crystalline architecture, buildings that sang softly in the wind. Talveen children played in gardens, their small forms flickering with joy. Elena saw human children among them, offspring of the volunteers who had chosen to stay and help build this new world. 4.1 billion Talveen, Crystalis said as they walked. Every single one of us alive, because your species looked at impossible mathematics and said, no. Because you showed the galaxy that some equations have variables that cannot be calculated. We didn't do it alone, Elena said. By the end, everyone helped. Yes. But you started it. You were the first to answer when everyone else had turned away. Crystalis stopped. At a memorial plaza. At its center stood a statue, carved from a single, massive crystal. It showed a human and a Talveen, hands reaching toward each other, standing together against a dying star. Around the base, names were etched in both languages. Thousands of names. We list every person who came to Caliph, Crystalis explained. Every human, every Murtani, every Korsoth, every species that stood with us. Your name is here, Captain, first among all others, the one who answered first. Elena looked at her name, feeling uncomfortable with the permanence of it. She was just a merchant captain who had made a choice. Nothing special, nothing heroic, just someone who had heard a call for help and responded. Your species thinks too small of itself, Crystalis said, as if reading her thoughts. You think you simply did what anyone would do. But that is precisely what makes you extraordinary. You cannot see your own uniqueness, because to you, compassion is not unusual. It is simply expected. They continued walking, passing schools where Talveen and human children learned together, hospitals where Murtani doctors trained Talveen healers, workshops where Varthos engineers and Talveen artisans collaborated on projects that blended technology and art. We are building something new here, Crystalis said. Not just a city, not just a world, a philosophy. We call it the Caliph principle. No species is expendable. No cost too great for life. No one left to die alone. Will it last? Elena asked. A year ago, everyone was moved by what happened. But people forget. They go back to their comfortable lives. They start calculating costs again. Perhaps, Crystalis agreed. But they will have to look at us first. Every time they consider abandoning someone, they will remember that the Talveen exist because people chose compassion over calculation. We are living proof that the impossible is simply the difficult that no one tried hard enough to achieve. They reached the main plaza where the ceremony would take place. Thousands were gathering Talveen, humans, and representatives from dozens of other species. Elena saw Admiral Chen in his dress uniform, looking uncomfortable with the attention. She saw Dr. Okonkwo, who had made the slipstream corridors work through sheer determination and caffeine. She saw crew members from dozens of ships, all looking like they would rather be anywhere else. High Arbiter Zelthorn stood on the central platform, his insectoid form somehow managing to look humble. The leader of the Galactic Concordat, here to speak at a ceremony celebrating the actions that had proven his original decision wrong. The ceremony began with traditional Talveen music, crystalline voices harmonizing in ways that made human ears ache with beauty. Then Zelthorn stepped forward to speak. 1 year ago, he began, his translated voice carrying across the plaza. The Galactic Concordat made a decision. We calculated that saving the Talveen would cost more than we were willing to pay. We were unanimous in this decision. We were logical. We were rational. We were economically sound. He paused, and Elena could hear the weight in his voice. We were also wrong. Completely, absolutely, shamefully wrong. We had become so focused on cost that we forgot value, so focused on efficiency that we forgot purpose, so focused on calculation that we forgot compassion. Zelthorn looked out at the assembled crowd. Humanity taught us a lesson. They showed us that true civilization is not measured by how efficiently you allocate resources. It is measured by whether you choose to save lives even when the cost seems too high. Especially when the cost seems too high. He turned to face the human section of the crowd. You are the youngest species in the Concordat, the newest members, the least experienced, and yet you taught all of us species with thousands of years of history what it truly means to be civilized. For that, the Concordat offers not just thanks, but apology. We should have been the ones to respond. Instead, we had to be shamed into action. The honesty was startling. Leaders rarely admitted failure so completely. Therefore, Zelthorn continued, the Concordat has voted again unanimously to enshrine the Caliph principle into galactic law. From this day forward, when any species faces extinction-level events, intervention is not optional. It is mandatory. Every member species is obligated to provide aid, regardless of cost. We will never again calculate whether lives are worth saving. They are. Always. Without exception. The plaza erupted in applause, crystalline bodies resonating in harmonics of approval. But Elena felt conflicted. Laws were good. Principles were good. But would they last when the moment had passed? When the emotion had faded? When the next hard decision came along? As if summoning her thoughts, Crystallis stepped forward to speak. The Galactic Concordat has offered us a seat on the council, he announced. A permanent position with full voting rights. The Talveen are honored by this offer. He paused, his form glowing brightly. We decline. The plaza fell silent in shock. We decline, Crystallis repeated. Because we believe this seat should go to humanity. They were the ones who saved us. They were the ones who changed the galaxy. They have earned this position through action, not through survival. Elena felt her heart sink. She knew what was coming. Admiral Chen stepped forward, his face carefully neutral. The people of Earth thank the Talveen for this generous offer. We also decline. Now the shock was absolute. Zelthorn's mandibles clicked in confusion. You decline? But this is a position of great power. Great influence. Yes, Chen agreed. Which is exactly why we shouldn't hold it. We didn't come to Caliph for power. We didn't save the Talveen to gain influence. We did it because it was right. If we take this seat now, every species will wonder if we helped because we wanted political advantage. That would poison everything we accomplished. He looked at Crystallis. Give the seat to the Talveen. They've earned the right to speak for those who might face what they faced. They can be the voice that ensures the Caliph principle isn't just words on paper. They lived it. They can defend it. The plaza remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the Talveen began to glow brighter, their collective light creating pulses visible from orbit. It was their way of showing deep emotion. "Then we accept," Crystalis said, his voice resonating with harmonics. Elena was learning to read as profound gratitude, mixed with determination. "We accept on behalf of every species that might one day need help. And we swear that we will never forget who taught us that help was possible." The ceremony continued with speeches from other species, presentations of awards that Elena immediately planned to put in storage, and celebrations that went on far too long. But finally, as the twin moons rose over New Talveen, Elena found herself alone in a quiet garden with Crystalis. "You could have taken that council seat," Crystalis said. "Your species would be powerful." "We don't need power," Elena replied. "We need to remember why we went to Caliph in the first place. If we start collecting rewards for doing the right thing, eventually, we'll only do the right thing when rewards are offered. You worry that humanity will change? That you will become like we were? Maybe. We're learning how the galaxy works, learning to calculate costs and benefits, learning to be efficient." Elena looked up at the stars. "I worry that in 100 years, when humanity is established and comfortable, we'll hear a distress beacon and do the math. And the math will say it's too expensive, and we'll turn away like everyone else did." Crystalis was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That is why we built this world. Why we named our cities as we did. Why we wrote your names in crystal that will last 10,000 years. We are humanity's memory. When you are tempted to calculate whether lives are worth saving, you will look at us and remember. 4 billion voices that will say, 'You saved us when we were strangers. Do not become the people who would have let us die.'" Elena felt something ease in her chest. Perhaps that was enough. Perhaps memory was the safeguard against comfortable indifference. 3 months after the ceremony, the Galactic Concordat met to vote on emergency aid to a species called the Whispering Folk, whose colony world faced ecological collapse. The cost would be enormous, the economic impact significant, the logistics challenging. Ambassador Crystalis stood to speak, his first major address as a council member. "I will not bore you with economics or calculations," he said. "I will tell you a story instead. 1 year ago, my people faced extinction. The math said we were not worth saving. Then a human captain named Elena Vasquez heard our distress call and said 2 words. 'I'm coming.' He let that hang in the air. Those 2 words changed everything. They saved 4 billion lives. They transformed galactic civilization. They taught us that some things matter more than cost." Crystalis looked around the chamber. "Today, the Whispering Folk need help. The math may say it's expensive. But I say, we're coming. Who stands with me?" Quote, "Re-surrender, we're coming." The vote was unanimous. Aid would be provided. It would not be the last such vote. Over the following years, the Caliph principle would be tested again and again. Species faced with disasters would receive help not because it was economically sound, but because it was right. The galaxy would struggle with the cost, would complain about the burden, would calculate the expense, but they would pay it. Because the alternative was to look at New Talveen, at the billions of people who existed because someone chose compassion over calculation, and admit they had not learned the lesson. Captain Elena Vasquez returned to merchant trading, running routes between human colonies and alien worlds. The wandering star had been repaired and upgraded, but Elena had refused any structural changes. She wanted to remember what her ship had been capable of when pushed beyond its limits. She carried normal cargo, now agricultural equipment, manufacturing supplies, luxury goods. Nothing exciting, nothing world-changing. Just honest work. But in her quarters, she kept a small crystal that Crystalis had given her. It was tuned to resonate at a specific frequency, one that Talveen used for important announcements. Sometimes, late at night when she couldn't sleep, she would hold the crystal and listen to the news from New Talveen. She heard about new cities being built, about Talveen artists creating works that blended human and crystalline aesthetics, about schools teaching the history of the Caliph rescue. She heard about humans who had settled on New Talveen, starting families, building lives alongside the people they had helped save. Most importantly, she heard about the children. Human children and Talveen children, growing up together, learning from each other. They were being raised on stories of the rescue, taught that when someone needs help, you help them. Cost doesn't matter. Mathematics doesn't matter. People matter. Those children would grow up to be the leaders and workers and citizens of tomorrow. They would carry the lesson forward. And perhaps, Elena thought, that was how you changed a galaxy. Not through one grand gesture, but through generations raised to believe that compassion was not optional. 10 years after Caliph, Elena received a message. It was from a young Talveen named Harmony, who had been a child during the evacuation. Harmony was now a captain herself, running supply routes between New Talveen and other worlds. Captain Vasquez, the message said, I wanted you to know that I'm following your path. I'm a merchant captain now, carrying cargo, making honest trades, but I keep my communication channels open. I listen for distress beacons. Because you taught me that sometimes the most important cargo you can carry is hope. Thank you for showing me what it means to answer when someone calls for help. Elena read the message 3 times, feeling something warm in her chest. The lesson was spreading. Generation by generation, person by person, spreading through the galaxy like ripples in still water. 30 years after Caliph, the Galactic Concordat voted to establish the Vasquez Award, given to individuals who exemplified the Caliph principle. Elena attended the ceremony, now 72 years old, moving more slowly but still sharp-eyed. The first award went to a Korsoth warrior who had coordinated the evacuation of a mining colony from a collapsing asteroid. The second went to a Murtani healer who had spent 5 years treating a plague on a world everyone else had quarantined. When Elena was asked to present the awards, she kept her speech short. These people didn't do anything special, she said. They just helped when help was needed. That should be normal. That should be expected. The fact that we're giving awards for it means we still have work to do. She looked out at the audience, at representatives from hundreds of species. Don't make heroes out of people who do the right thing. Make the right thing so common that nobody thinks it's heroic. Make compassion so normal that cruelty is unthinkable. That's when we'll know we've truly learned the lesson of Caliph. 50 years after Caliph, Ambassador Crystallis, now ancient even by Talveen standards, stood in the Memorial Plaza on New Talveen. Around him, the city had grown into a true metropolis, home to 5 million Talveen and 1 million humans, and 500,000 members of other species. He looked at the statue of the human and Talveen standing together. Weathering had made the crystal even more beautiful, creating rainbows in the light. We have not forgotten, he said aloud to the empty plaza. We will never forget. And across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, in 100 languages, children learned about the Caliph rescue. They learned about the humans who said, I'm coming, when everyone else had turned away. They learned that compassion was strength, that caring was courage, that standing together was the most powerful thing anyone could do. Some of those children would grow up to be leaders. Some would be warriors. Some would be healers or engineers or artists or merchants. But all of them would carry the lesson forward, because that was how you changed a galaxy. Not through force or intimidation or superior technology. Through example. Through choosing to do the right thing even when it was hard, especially when it was hard, and trusting that others would see and remember and follow. Elena Vasquez died at the age of 97, peacefully in her sleep aboard the Wandering Star during a routine cargo run. Her crew brought her body to New Talveen, where she was buried in the Memorial Plaza beneath the statue she had tried so hard to avoid. At her funeral, 10,000 people gathered, humans and Talveen and representatives from every species in the Concordat. They told stories of the rescue, of the impossible effort, of the moment when humanity taught the galaxy what it had forgotten. Ambassador Crystallis, now so ancient he could barely maintain his form, spoke last. Elena Vasquez did not think she was special, he said. She thought she simply did what anyone would do. And in her humility, she revealed humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. To them, compassion is not extraordinary. It is ordinary. It is expected. It is simply what you do. His light flickered, but his voice remained strong. We Talveen live long lives. Many of us will live another century or more. And every day of those years, we will remember. We will tell our children and our children's children about the humans who came when no one else would. About the captain, who answered our distress call with 2 words. I'm coming. He paused, his form glowing with ancient grief and eternal gratitude. The galaxy is better because Elena Vasquez and her people chose compassion over calculation. We live because they refuse to do the math, and we will ensure that their lesson outlives even our long memories. On Earth, the news of Elena's death was met with quiet mourning. She was not the last survivor of the Calith rescue. Many crew members still lived, now in their 70s and 80s, but she was the first, the one who had started it all with a simple decision to respond. In classrooms across Earth and the colonies, teachers paused their lessons to tell students about Captain Vasquez. About an ordinary merchant captain who had made an extraordinary choice. About someone who proved that one person answering a call for help could change everything. Remember, the teachers said, that you don't need to be special to make a difference. You just need to care. You just need to try. You just need to be willing to say, I'm coming when someone needs help. The children listened. Some would remember. Some would forget. But enough would carry the lesson forward that the ripples would continue spreading, generation after generation, across the galaxy and through time. 100 years after Calith, New Talveen hosted a centennial celebration. The city had become one of the great metropolises of the galaxy, a center of art and learning and innovation. The Memorial Plaza had expanded to include monuments to all the species that had participated in the rescue. A young human girl named Elena, named for her great-great-grandmother, stood before the statue of the human and Talveen standing together. She was 7 years old, and her class was on a field trip to learn about the rescue. Teacher, she asked, why did they stay? The humans, I mean. When they knew they couldn't save everyone, why did they vote to stay and die? Her teacher, an elderly Talveen named Resonance, knelt down beside her, because they understood something that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. They understood that how you treat people in their darkest moment defines who you are. They chose to stand with us, to show us we mattered, even when practical action was no longer possible. But they could have died, young Elena protested. Yes, but they also could have lived with the knowledge that they abandoned people who needed them. Some costs are too high to pay. Resonance's light pulsed gently. In the end, the galaxy came to help. But if the humans had not chosen to stay, if they had not been willing to die rather than abandon us, no one else would have found the courage to act. Their willingness to stand together saved us all. The little girl thought about that, looking up at the statue of her famous ancestor. I want to be like her. I want to help people. Then you will, Resonance said. And perhaps one day, someone will stand before a statue of you, learning about how you changed the galaxy through compassion. That night, as the twin moons rose over New Talveen, a merchant ship received a distress call from a mining station facing catastrophic equipment failure. The captain was young, human, relatively new to deep space trade. She listened to the distress call, checked her cargo schedule, calculated the delay and potential losses. The math said, responding would cost her a significant amount of time and money. She would miss her delivery window, might even lose her contract. She thought about a statue on New Talveen, about a captain who had responded when everyone else turned away, about the lesson that had changed galactic civilization. She opened a channel. "This is Captain Dara Okonkwo of the merchant ship Endeavour 2. We've received your distress call. Don't worry, we're coming." And somewhere, in the way that time and memory and inspiration connect across distances and years, Elena Vasquez smiled.